Hello, and welcome to the Dr. Nurse Mama Show, prescribing hope for healthy families here on American Family Radio. Here's your host, Professor, Pediatric Nurse Practitioner, and Mom of Four, Dr. Jessica Peck.
Well, hey there, friends, and welcome to my favorite time of day, getting to spend time with you, prescribing hope for healthy families. And listen, we are going to talk about a topic today that I constantly get questions about. It doesn't matter where I go, what we talk about on the show, where I see parents in practice and clinical practice, or I see students who are learning to be healthcare providers, or if I'm in my church, or if I'm just in line at the grocery store. The one subject that brings the most questions from parents everywhere for the last several years is the issue of technology. It is something that we are just still trying to wrap our brains around, and we have this very unique generational gap where we have parents, a generation of parents, whether that's Gen X, whether that's millennials, whether that's baby boomers who are maybe even grandparents raising their grandkids. We are raising a digital native generation. We're raising Gen Z and Gen Alpha who don't just see and expect technology to be present. They expect it to be excellent. They expect it to be fast. They expect it to be good. They expect it to be helpful. And it's really hard when we don't have that lived experience. We don't know what it was like to grow up with a smartphone. And some of you, me included, are thinking, thank the Lord for that. But this is a reality that is facing Gen Z. And what I see is a lot of times very negative messages that go to them, like, this is a terrible time to be alive. And we see the cultural darkness. But today, we're going to find hope and help, and most importantly, the light of Christ shining through all of that cultural chaos. Screens are everywhere. Our kids are living in a screen-saturated world. They are on our walls. They're in our pockets. They're in our kids' backpacks. They're everywhere that we go. They're in cars. Parents know something feels off, but just so many of us don't know, where do we even start? And most importantly, how do we respond without fear? Because there's so much fear that is driving the motivation and response here. Or maybe besides fear, there's guilt. Like, I don't feel like I'm doing the best, but I don't know how to do any better. Or just the extremes of, hey, let's just all go back to the Partridge Family era. Let's go back to Little House on the Prairie. Like, let's go back to times without technology. Or, let's just dive in and have a Jetsons kind of house here. Today's conversation is about moving from reaction to responding with biblical clarity. And my guest today is a frequent guest. I've got back with me today Dr. Josh Mulvihill. He's a pastor, he's an author, he's a husband, he's a father, he's an executive director of church and family ministry at Renew a Nation, and he has written a book. We did a series all last year called Worldview Wednesday. You can go back and look for those on the podcast at afr.net or any podcast platform, where we really walked through how do you be intentional on to helping your child develop a biblical worldview. And today I have him back to talk about two articles that he's written, which he frequently writes and puts out resources for families. And we'll talk about a compelling case that media isn't neutral. It is a form of digital discipleship. And parents have to lead with intentionality. We can't just be passive about this. And while information abounds, wisdom is scarce. And it's not about banning technology or living in fear. It's about asking better questions. What is shaping our children? Who is discipling them? How do we steward technology for God's glory instead of letting it shape our homes by default? So, Josh, so grateful to have you back. Thank you so much for joining us and asking good questions. How are you? How are your family? How's your family? And you have big news to share with us, and I'm excited to share it.
Yes, it's good to be back, and hello, Jessica. Yeah, the big news for our family is our oldest son just got engaged a few weeks ago. So we're gaining a daughter. Exciting. Yeah, we're super excited. Wedding this summer. That's the first of our kids to go down that path. So new for us, but very excited.
That is super exciting. It's funny because my husband is the only son in his family. And so my father-in-law, he wanted to make sure I knew that I was part of his family. And he's like, "You are not my daughter-in-law. You're my daughter." I'm like, "Dad, you're going to have to say I'm your daughter-in-law, because otherwise it's just raising all kinds of questions. Don't introduce me as your daughter-in-law. That is okay." But it's so exciting to be in that series of firsts. And you have a new podcast coming out too.
Yeah,
So that's
yeah.
exciting. Tell us about that.
It's called the Gospel Shaped Family Podcast, and the hope is that it helps people develop a biblical worldview, especially in their parenting and grandparenting. So we talk about subjects along those lines. It's my wife and I. So if you've ever listened to a couple podcasts, they just have a little bit of a fun dynamic because of that aspect. So conversational, grab coffee with us as we talk about our life and what that looks like with our kids. And then we hit just a broad range of topics. So we just covered having, how do you navigate crushes with kids? We're kind of down this path, obviously, with our son getting married, and with, February, the month of love. Our kids, it seems to generate these things in the world we live in, both in school, especially in February, but just the idea that everybody should have a boyfriend or a girlfriend early on. And so that was one of the recent ones we talked about. We just covered eating healthy in the new year. I don't know, I don't even know if you know this, Jessica. I think I've told you, but we live on a farm. We
Yeah.
moved out to this farm like 5 years ago for the whole purpose of helping us eat healthy. We raise most of our meat and dairy and eggs. It's a lot of work, but it has resulted in a general better health for our family. And that was a big lifestyle change for us. So, that we just, in like that episode, we talked through some of a biblical perspective of food. Our body doesn't belong to us. It's a temple of the Spirit. It belongs to the Lord. And we want to treat it well. Those are some of the recent ones, but we're all over the map with what we talk about because worldview is comprehensive. It touches every area of life, and it matters with our kids in all areas. Discipleship is all of life. So come join us. It's on YouTube. It is on all audio podcasts, and everybody will get to hear Dr. Jessica. We are also airing the Worldview Wednesday episodes. There's about a dozen of them, and you can catch those there as well.
Well, that is, people ask me all the time, how do you find hope in a world that is as dark as today? And honestly, Josh, I find hope in families like yours. You're right. Hearing that husband-wife dynamic, and you talking about raising your family on a farm in Minnesota, which your state has been in the news a little bit lately,
Oh,
but
man.
just finding hope though in people who are looking to Jesus despite all of the cultural chaos. Like, I want to listen. And tell us one more time, what's the name of the podcast and where can we find it?
It's called the Gospel Shaped Family Podcast. Anywhere audio podcast as well as YouTube. You can find them there.
So tell us, now that we're on that subject though, Josh, what is it like living in your state that is all over the national news? What kind of things are you seeing? How can we pray? How can we pray for your state?
Well, it's crazy in Minnesota right now. I'm sure you're all seeing that in the news. You can pray for the Christian witness that we have. Obviously, there's a very heated exchange happening with people of all kinds of opinions, and we want the gospel of Christ. I mean, that is the answer for the hurt that we see in our world and in our state. And it's a great opportunity, of course, to share the love of Christ, the gospel of Christ with others. It's a challenging time to live in with our state, and we were the center of the storm with everything that happened and transpired with George Floyd. It kind of feels like round two is happening
Yeah.
here, and I'm always hesitant to jump into these kind of cultural issues right in the moment because I want to give time for the dust to settle, to get clarity scripturally around some of the issues that are occurring with the topics that are at hand. But So I don't know if you want to go into the whole immigration side of thing and what's happening in Minnesota. But I will say a couple of things. One, nations and borders are biblical. It's a good thing. Borders are where bad ideas end and good ideas begin. You can just see that in the differences between nations. And so, with that in mind, when there are people that are in our country, the idea of a sojourner, the idea of a foreigner, there is a hospitality, a blessing that we want to have to them, just like we would to anybody that's coming to our home, expected or unexpected. We have that biblical hospitality. But what I'm seeing right now, so I'll say with that, we have 10 plus million people in our nation that have come here in a way that is not healthy, and it's transforming our country. And so there, I do support law enforcement getting a handle on that in a way that protects human dignity in the process. It's going to be messy. Whenever you have 10 plus million people come into a country, it's going to be messy to clean up. It should follow law in the process. So, with this mindset of what's happening in Minnesota, I'm seeing the same kind of playbook played out that was happening with George Floyd, in the sense that we had a lot of conversation about oppression and oppressors, and that's a Marxist kind of worldview. And so when we get into the realm of immigrant, if it falls into that same kind of conversation category of oppressor and oppression, it really is moving forward kind of a Marxist playbook. And so I want to encourage Christians not to get caught up in that kind of ideological argument. And you're seeing that pretty regularly in the media right now, where the immigrant is the oppressed and the government or whoever else is in support is the oppressor. And so we want to break out of that and operate according to biblical categories and biblical framework within how we're thinking about immigration and how we are thinking about the sojourner and the foreigner. Just like race was often co-opted by kind of a liberal progressive mindset to, this happened right out of the gate with George Floyd. We saw narratives around equity and BLM, and it kind of co-opted. And of course, the Bible says a lot about race and justice. Equally, it does around immigration and the foreigner and the sojourner. So we want those things to inform how we operate and how we think. So I'll just encourage, we could build a whole program around this, but that's what I'll kind of focus on right now, is don't get co-opted by that oppression ideology in this conversation, and keep your eyes open for it, because you'll start to see it pop up as the conversation's happening.
Well, Josh, it's good to hear your experience. And I mean, you're right. It's just scratching the surface. You're talking about very, very complex issues that require a lot of care and that are nuanced. And some of these issues are difficult to talk about. And we see division even within the church. And that brings us exactly back to what we're going to talk about. And as we're coming up on our first break, I'll let our listeners know that what I am concerned about is all of the social media messaging that happens. And we see such polarization, and we see such characterization of narratives. And this is something that our kids are swimming in. And if they look at one video, then the algorithm detects that curiosity. The algorithm doesn't have a soul. It doesn't say, oh, here's what's best for your kid. Oh, here's the messages about this, and trying to interpret these really complex situations that are happening that can have disturbing images that they see. The algorithm is not saying, oh, okay, here's how to help your kid navigate that, but it is happening. And if unless your kid is living under a rock, even if they don't have social media, even if they don't have smartphones, they're exposed to conversations with kids who do. This is what kids are talking about. So when we come back, we are going to talk about formation. How do we take all of these messages that are coming in, the conflicting messages, even conflicting messages that happen within the church community, and how do do we direct them back to a biblical worldview? How do we find hope in a world that seems to be addicted to the doom scroll? Well, we'll talk about that when we come back with Dr. Josh Mulvihill. Listen, I'll see you on the other side of this break. Welcome back, friends. That is I Could Sing of Your Love Forever by Sonic Flood. Some of you are having a flashback to other good Christian music, and I could sing of God's love forever. And that today is the encouraging message. We are living in a world that is addicted to the doom scroll. When we click on our social media, it starts to auto feed, and AI is really impacting this much more than you're even aware. AI is now determining what do you linger on, what do you hover over, what do you click on, and it is crafting content to send to you to cultivate a worldview. And we see events that are happening in the world that are troublesome, that are traumatic, that can be difficult to interpret, that have talking heads trying to talk and interpret what you should believe about this, what you should do about this, what you shouldn't believe about this. This is all related to what we're calling digital discipleship. We used to think of discipleship in a much more traditional way, where we help our kids to develop spiritual disciplines and we help them develop a biblical worldview. But we have a powerful force that's in the world today, and that source is technology. Today, I'm talking to Dr. Josh Mulvihill, and he is a pastor, an author, a dad, a husband, and now a podcast host on his podcast. And we're talking today about his experience and views with technology through that lens. Josh, let's talk about what you mean when we talk about media as a form of digital discipleship. I think this is something that, as parents, we're just not being intentional enough in folding that digital life into a discipleship narrative. How do we unpack what that means in everyday family life?
Well, it shapes who our kids become and the beliefs they hold, whether the people that influence them are in flesh and blood or are on a screen or in audio. They're still shaping who we become. So that's what we mean by discipleship. I actually just read a research article that showed how since the smartphone came into existence in, I forget, it's like 2007, 2008 timeframe, how it has shaped the voting preferences of men and women based on something you just said, Jessica, the feeds that they're getting. And there's no at least this article said there's no nefarious motives other than they're trying to generate views, and the algorithms are trying to feed people what it is that they're wanting. And for women versus men, the voting gap is about, I think it was 25 points that females have gone left versus males, based on, and you could see the voting change, the voting changes that happened as the smartphone came in. And I'm just stating that as a example of how screens and media shape us, sometimes that we don't even know, as we're looking at not only as our kids, but us as adults as well. And we start seeing what's on these screens, and we think, oh, I can withstand. I'm set in my beliefs, or I'm locked in. I know God's word really well. It's not going to move me. But it is a powerful, powerful thing what we have with screens. So 100% is, we're in the forming process forever. That the early days are the most impactful from a worldview shaping standpoint. But it's just super critical for all of us to be really mindful about what is going into our children's minds, their hearts and their minds, as well as our own. And so it is shaping them. The average amount of time that a child spends on the screen today, this is elementary age, is 7 hours. And for teenagers, it's 9 hours. And so you start adding up the amount of hours in a year, it ends up being over 100 hours, 100 days combined when you add that daily. And you think, man, if I was going to put my kids in some kind of shaping environment, that's a third of their year. It's so impactful. And I think we underestimate the shaping ability that screens and media is having in our lives and with our kids. And it's, as you said, it's not we don't, this shouldn't be a fear-inducing thing. We don't want it to be a guilt-ridden thing. It's an awareness-raising thing, and it's really easy. I got 5 of my own kids. Some of them are still young. I've got one that's in grade school still. The rest are all teens. And it's just, screens are invasive, and they're the thing we all deal with. We're not going to go back to the era of, Laura Ingalls Wilder and have no screens. But
I wish.
we do have to, yeah, but I think there's some critical questions. I'd love to hear your thoughts about these, Jessica. And these are questions every parent asks. When do I when do I give my child a phone, a smartphone? How much time should they spend when they are on devices? When should they access social media? Those are good questions. I'd love to hear what your thoughts are on that, Jessica, and what you've done with your family.
Well, Josh, I have thoughts. I definitely have thoughts. And first of all, in response, I'll answer your questions here in just a second, but it really strikes me how much the world has changed, because I think about my generation even, which I'm not, I don't think I'm that old. My kids troll me for being born in literally the previous century because it boggles their mind that I was born in the 1900s. But, I think about growing up. I lived with my grandparents for a long time. I mean, we would watch Walter Cronkite or another news media anchor that delivered the news in a more factual way than is done now. Cable news was just in its infancy. It was just the rise of talk radio where we had all these commentaries. So you would see the facts and you would unpack them with your family and you would talk about them around the dinner table and you would interpret that through that lens. And now I'm so concerned about the rise of vicarious credibility. It is so easy for an influencer to get credibility. Oh, if so-and-so that I respect follows them, well, then this person must be credible. And we have all of these competing messages. But the one thing that cuts through all of that, the one thing that's more influential is the family relationship. And research shows that if you have a strong relationship, parent-child relationship, that influence will last all others. And so instead of trying to be the talking heads in our kids' lives, we need to be the relationship connector. And then that gives us credibility. But to answer your questions, I do have some specific. You said when to get a smartphone, how much time should they spend on it, and when should they get social media? I actually have some really simple answers for this. So when should they get a smartphone? First of all, delay it as long as possible, as long as you can. Every family has different situations. There are some families who may be navigating a divorce where kids are going from one household to the other, or other specific situations. Maybe they're working out on the farm and they need a phone, to be able to communicate or that kind of thing. But so look at your family situation, but there actually is a tool that was put together by AT&T and by the American Academy of Pediatrics. It's actually pretty good. You can search it on the internet, and it talks about developmental readiness. Where's the starting point for a conversation on that? So I say as long as possible until at least age 13, longer if you can, and then when your child is developmentally ready. Another important thing for me on this, Josh, is that not every kid in every family is going to be ready at the same age. I think that's a big mistake we make as parents to set milestones by age. You can have a smartphone when you're 16. Everybody gets one when they're 16. No, everyone gets one when they're ready, and make it contractual in nature. When you exhibit these characteristics, these developmental traits, these responsibilities, then you get this privilege. It's all responsibility and privilege. Question number 2, how much time should they spend? This is super interesting because the shift has gone away from time, because time restraints really position parents as the phone police. And nobody wants to be the phone police. And every place is different. Some kids may have screen time because they're taking an online class, at a community college for dual credit or something like that. It's all about why. It's all about the purpose. It's all about what am I trying to accomplish when I am on here. It's about minimizing that mindless scrolling that just, where 2 or 3 hours disappear. That's really sobering, Josh, when you say a third of their lives. And then a third of their lives they're spending sleeping. And then a third of their lives they're spending being human. You've got to eat. You've got to, you've got to have hygiene. You've got to go places and do things. That is really technology is a thief of time. Third one, social media. Again, as long as possible, delay that. Shouldn't even be an option till age 13. That is the age set by federal law and the Children's Privacy Act. But Josh, we are so callous as parents to terms of use. We just scroll down to the bottom of that legalese. Yeah, that's an inconvenience. Click yes, okay. But if your child gets on a social media platform before the age of 13 and violates that terms of use, then you can void any legal protection available to you should something bad happen to your child there. And parents don't intend for that. They don't want that to happen. But if your child has identity issues, social media is going to make it worse. If they have self-esteem issues, social media is not going to help. And our kids often will kind of gaslight us if we're being honest, like everybody else has it, Mom, and this is affecting me so negatively and I'm missing out and it's really making me sad. And we just have to be the parent and just say, you are given to me by God to steward, and I see that you are not ready. So that's the answer to your questions. Do you have any follow-ups? Anything you want to respond to on that?
I love your answer and delay as long as possible, and I would agree with that 100%. There's so many research statistics out on the impact, just the mental health impact, the impact on a person's self-identity, and the impact on the sleep and all. I mean, there's so many things, the addictive nature of it, and they tend to be on the not great side when you start to see those kinds of things. And so I also agree with what you said. What's the purpose for having these things? And should there be a good purpose? It makes total sense. And, these are tools just like any other tool that we have in life. So they do have great value when used properly. But when they're used for entertainment purposes, predominantly when they are used for communication tools, that's a good one, but it could be negative if they're used. Our kids can have a whole lot of improper uses communication-wise with them as well. So with our family, we've gone down the path of 16 is when they get a cell phone when they drive, and we figure if they can handle the responsibility of a big vehicle, their own life in their hands, they can do that with a phone as well. And with social media, we've held off till 18. My perspective is effectively a person's childhood ends when they get on social media and largely on the internet, because the kinds of things they are now exposed to it's the world of adult ideas, and it's heavy, it's a lot. And so as a father today, I want to delay that as much as possible until foundational maturity and biblical truths are established as much as possible in the hearts and minds of my kids. And the challenge for me, I don't know if you've seen this, Jessica, we did this really well with our older kids, but as they got phones, so we have 2 of our 5 have phones at this point. they sit on the couch and all the younger siblings gather around and they look
Yep.
over their shoulders now. We're like, whoa, time out. Like, come on, guys. Like,
It's
you're
called
like,
shoulder surfing. There's actually a
yeah,
term for that. It's
oh,
called
that's good. Okay.
shoulder surfing. And so people think like, oh, my kid doesn't have a phone. I don't have to worry about that. But shoulder surfing is a
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah. So we've got the shoulder surfing. I didn't know that was the term for it.
That's a term.
Yeah, that's good. I learned something new here. Yeah, so then we've had to think through how phones are used by older siblings with younger siblings, and they've had to have some conscious, intentional usage just to, because some things are totally fine. Like sometimes, you know, some reels on Instagram are hilarious. I mean, we can have a comedy hour just by watching the 30-second reels, and they're funny. I mean, they are funny. And so there's things that's great. It's wonderful. I don't mind that. But as I sometimes say, these are like razor sharp knives and guns and things that we use regularly in our lives out on our farm, but they can also do a ton of damage. We wouldn't give our kids those kinds of tools without proper guidance and training. And in my view, screens today fit in that same kind of category. They're very useful. They're a wonderful tool. Well, when proper training and guidance is given, but we need to treat them with that same level of respect that it can cause as much damage as those other kinds of things in their life. And if we saw a screen with that same, held that same kind of respect for it and said, okay, let's think through
It
how
would
we're
change
going to do
everything.
things. Yeah.
It would change everything, Josh. We're already at our second break. I can't believe that, but I said that. Parents are so worried about weapons at school, but almost every child carries in their backpack a weapon that is so powerful because it holds the power of the tongue. And we know with the Bible what James tells us about that. And I have so much more to say about that. I love, Josh, that you delay as long as possible, and setting certain ages allows you the opportunity to strengthen your relationship, to be able to maximize your influence. Listen, we got a lot more about digital discipleship when we come back.
It's so unusual, it's frightening. You see right through the mess inside me. And you call me out to pull me in. You tell me I can start again. And I don't need to keep on hiding. I'm fully known and loved by you. You won't let go, no matter what I do. And it's not one or the other. It's hard truth and ridiculous grace to be known, fully known and loved by you. I'm fully known and loved by you.
Welcome back, friends. That is Known by Taryn Wells. And hey, this is a powerful truth today because kids today are more digitally connected than any generation before them. But what this generation wants more than anything is to be known, to be seen, to be known, to be loved. And we have such a great opportunity as their parents, as their grandparents, as other adults who are invested in spiritual formation for Gen Z, Gen Alpha, and the generation already being born behind them, yet to be named. We have such an opportunity for digital discipleship. Now, we have always been invested since the beginning of the spread of the gospel. We have been instructed on how to disciple our families, how to communicate the truths, and how to create a rich legacy, a heritage of faith. But in today's world, that discipleship really needs to extend to the digital arena. And I'm talking today to Dr. Josh Mulvihill, an author, a speaker, a pastor, a dad, a husband who is living this with with 5 kids of his own, and we're talking about how do we even start. And I think, Josh, once parents recognize this, they tend to just kind of get stuck and get paralyzed by fear. And we need to move that awareness to action. Now, every family is a little bit different, and we've even talked about how our families have been a little bit different, but the commonality is being intentional in the approach. And Josh, I have been that family. My husband and I have been that family. My kids know what they will call as the humiliation of a flip phone. They had a flip phone before they got a smartphone because we gave them responsibility in that incremental period. And yes, it was true. All their friends around them had a smartphone, but we had already established that we, as your parents, have been given this great privilege, this great blessing of raising you, and we are going to steward that in the best way that we know. And what I know from research is that those uniqueness, my family does things this way, and confidence in that identity, it's actually good for kids. And they can know that, yeah, my family is weird. We do it this way, but I'm confident in that. So we never had TVs in the bedroom. We always had computers out in a communal space where anybody could walk by. There was never any private streaming. We always have phones checked in the kitchen. Nobody has their phone under the covers looking at things in the dark of night when, that pull for and temptation. And you talked about, the exposure that they have, Josh. One of the things that I really think about that we don't think about enough, I think, is the responsibility that they have. Because when they see their friends, for example, making claims of self-harm, like saying, I want to harm myself, then once you see that, you have a responsibility to act on that. And 13, 14-year-old kids are usually not ready for that. And so, Josh, I would love for you to talk about just kind of that transition from awareness to action. Like how can you encourage families to just take that stand and not to look at it as a limitation, as being the phone police, but how these boundaries, these healthy boundaries, are actually the path to freedom, to spiritual freedom.
Yeah. Well, I love some of the principles that you just mentioned, and I think those are super good, super healthy to have. And I would encourage families to have those kinds of things in place, both to help children and protect them. Most of the stuff that our kids find online, they're not doing it, at least to begin. There's no, many of them, it finds them. They're just online doing their thing, and boom, this stuff finds them, and then they go down a rabbit hole as they get exposed to it. And so you're, protecting from that is important. But your question, how do we move into action? I think having clarity on why you have media in your home is really helpful. You mentioned the why, and that intentionality is critical. Is it for entertainment? Is it for communication? Is it for homework? Is it for, what purpose? Is it actually work related? There's different usage, and, if it's a lot of our usage is entertainment based, and that specific usage in our home, we use it for that at times, but we greatly limit that, and we want other alternatives. Our usage goes up right now. This time of year in Minnesota, it's below zero today. It's super cold, and so these times, then we'll gather around, and our family loves the show All Creatures Great and Small, just released again for the year, the new season, and we'll watch stuff like that at this time of year. Getting into the warmer months of the year, we find replacements for screens, and I think that's a good alternative for our kids. There's a phrase, if you're going to take a bone from a dog, give a dog a bone with more meat. I think I've even mentioned that here before, but it's good as a reminder. If we're going to take screens out of our kids' lives, let's put something better in place. And for our family, that's outdoors. There's so many wonderful things outdoors. That's books. We try to put great books in front of our kids. We have a library in our house, literally a room that's just floor to ceilings with books, and we read a lot. And when we discover the joy that's in pages, and we discover the beauty that's outside, and the things that we can do with hobbies and enjoyment, screens kind of lose their luster a little bit, because a lot of what happens in screens is really living vicariously through someone else in a simulated adventure. And so if we can replace that with our own life adventures, both in the pages of books and in real life, there's not as much draw when we see that on a screen. And with our family, that's part of why we've moved to a farm. We live an adventurous life. We could literally be a reality TV show with what we deal with. Literally, like when I'm getting texts from my son and wife as I'm right now that we had to give water to our cows and the water froze because it's so cold out.
Oh,
How do
no.
we, this is just our life.
That's awesome.
We don't need to watch this on the screen because we're living. No, that's not everybody. But we have chosen to, and sometimes we feel like, man, there's a little too much excitement in our life, and that's okay. But I would say, what's the why? What's the intentional use of media that is in your life? We do want to limit some screen usage. So I'm not going to say what that looks like for each family. I think that's a question that we need to discuss. But what I think, screens have replaced relationships for kids today. That's a big deal. And so I think we need to just monitor how our kids are doing relationally and with communication and engaging with other people. And if that's being replaced by screens, we especially want to limit the usage on that front for the flesh and blood kinds of relationships that we have. And so and there's other reasons as well we would limit, but that's a big one. And I would say, as parents, none of us like to disappoint our kids. We don't, we want to see them happy, but this is an area where I think we need some backbone at times with our parents, because the requests are endless and the onslaughts are ongoing, and it just wears you down as a parent. And so I think if we can have, a predetermined plan and communicate that graciously and then enforce that consistently, what are our boundaries? That becomes less of a decision that has to be made on the spot versus trying to negotiate some usage all the time. So if you've not, as a parent or as a couple, kind of sat down and thought, what are our boundaries? How do we want media used in our home? That would be a good thing to sit and actually, what's your plan? Have a plan and then implement the plan so it's not a fly by the seat of your pants. The last piece I'll mention here with this is monitor the messaging that's happening in the media that your kids are exposed to. So the principle for my wife and I is wherever our kids are in media, we want to be there as well. And that takes a lot of commitment and a lot of time. So we try to listen to the music they're listening to. We want to be watching the things they're watching. We want to, this isn't an invasive way. And we're not we're not sermonizing all this stuff as they are listening and watching, but we want to know, is this healthy for them to be engaged with it primarily? And sometimes we get to have a lot of fun because we're watching and listening to the same things, and it's enjoyable and it builds family culture that way. And other times we say, okay, there's probably some better things out there for you. What could those alternatives be then? One of my sons wanted to listen to Morgan Wallen, who has some really catchy music. He has a lot of music that sings about drug or alcohol and sexual lyrics and some swearing, not a ton, but enough that I'm like, there's probably a better alternative than Morgan. His music's just got some low-level stuff in it that's just, this doesn't align with what I would see in scripture. Is there a better alternative out there? And yes, there is. Let's find those. And so, we're having those kinds of conversations regularly with our kids. And I'm sure as parents, it's helpful to guide our kids into some good options. And there are tons out there. There's a lot of good media that we can utilize as families.
Well, it's just so encouraging just to hear your personal testimony, Josh, of living this out, because these are tough conversations and these are tough boundaries to have. But just to hear about, hey, here, this is how we're wrestling it out, not walking it perfectly, but being intentional and thinking about it. And I thought of three things as you were talking. First is, parents do need to have a backbone and let their yes be yes and their no be no. I have seen so much negotiating that goes on with parents, and just like you said, wearing them down. But if you just make a habit of, of taking time, if you need time to make your decisions, think, okay, I need to think about this. I'll give you an answer tomorrow morning. And then that's it. Like, I'm going to talk about it. I'm going to seek wisdom. I'm going to talk to your dad. I'm going to, talk to the other parents involved or whatever it is. And just making that your yes be yes and your no be no, that has been really transformational for me. And just being comfortable that sometimes your response makes your kids uncomfortable emotionally. That's okay. And I tell them, I love you enough to let you be upset about that. That's okay. And one day you're going to see it my way. I hope and I pray, but I'm comfortable enough to say no. That's the first thing I thought. The second thing, oh my goodness, Josh, I cannot even cheer along enough in providing a compelling alternative. And you're right, maybe not everybody can move to a farm in Minnesota, but wherever you are, I'll give you an example really lived out from my family just over the holiday break. So I have a son who's in college and he invited some friends over. I made brownies because I know if you feed them, they will come. It's really that simple. You just make food. And I was working myself on a jigsaw puzzle. And so they came, they were curious because these kinds of things make Gen Z curious because it wasn't a screen. And so they sat down, started eating brownies, started doing the puzzle with me. The next thing I knew, we were playing Trivial Pursuit. And then they asked my son, hey, can we do that again? That was really fun, playing Trivial Pursuit with your family. And they came over and that's like become our thing. Oh, hey, can we have a family night with your family and make brownies, do a puzzle, and play Trivial Pursuit? Kids want connection. So providing that alternative, there's so much that you can do in leading your family, whether that's saying, hey, I'm going on a walk. Kids are curious. They may want to go with you. It can be just that simple. It can't just be get off your phone, get off your phone, get off your phone while we're sitting there on our phone. The third thing I thought is exactly what you said, affirming being involved in their media sources, listening to what they're listening to. It's one of the reasons why it's good to delay it as long as possible and having those conversations and asking questions like, how does this music artist, how do their lyrics align with your spiritual values? And sometimes they just don't. And asking those questions are really great ways to go. Well, Josh, once again, we're running out of time here, but I'm so grateful to you and to your wife, to your family for just trying to live out your walk with Christ and to be intentional about helping your children develop a biblical worldview. Once again, you can listen back to the series that Josh and I did last year, Worldview Wednesday. Josh, tell us once again what the name of your podcast is and where to find it.
It's the Gospel Shaped Family Podcast. Anywhere podcasts are available.
So if you want to hear more about how do you feed the cows when the water is frozen, let me tell you, we don't have that problem here in Texas. Now, the cows may get out on the road quite a bit. We actually do have a lot of problems with cows that can come up, but not that the water is frozen. Listen, wherever you are in your journey to provide digital discipleship, to be a good influence, to influence your child's worldview, to help them cultivate a worldview, wherever you are in that, I pray that the Lord will bless you and keep you and make his face to shine upon you and be gracious to you. We are holding out hope for you and we are continuing to offer help for you. There is hope in this world. We can be the light of Christ as such a hope. Listen, I'll see you right back here next time.